Self, Miranda Hart and Minnie Driver are among those telling all to Kirsty Young.
I would do great on MasterChef.
I like MasterChef. I watch how people cook everything and then go on and make beans and toast.
A nice Caesar salad.
And then this EastEnders, so far-fetched and dramatic, and I love that.
And Mark's favourite is?
Sporting news.
Sporting news, we're all different.
And the odd murder.
I am getting a little bit concerned how many murders Mark is watching.
Well, we both like travelling a lot, so we watch
Race Across the Road.
Race Across the World.
That's when he's not watching it, but he is.
Yeah.
Closet watching.
As the nation waits, the next chapter is being written, and the outcome could change everything. With expert analysis and updates, we'll break it all down as America decides on one of the most important nights in global politics.
So you must get out and vote. You have to go and vote.
But I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a tight race until the very end.
There is only one place to be as history unfolds.
US election results night, tonight at 10:40 on BBC One and iPlayer.
This is BBC One Now the News with Fiona Bruce in London and Clive Myrie in Washington.
At 10, we're live in Washington as America chooses its next president. In a knife-edge race right up to polling day, Kamala Harris's camp says it's confident of victory. While Donald Trump, having voted in Florida, claims he's going to win and it won't even be close. We'll be live at the headquarters of both candidates on this momentous day. And we'll bring you the very latest as we prepare for the polls to close and tell you everything you need to know to keep up to date across the BBC as the results come in.
Also on the programme tonight, as Olympic champion Sir Chris Hoy undergoes cancer treatment, the Health Secretary says he'll review guidance for prostate cancer screening. And a special report with Lebanon's Civil Defence Force rescuing those buried by Israeli missile strikes.
And on BBC London, Thursday's tube strike has been called off. Meanwhile, we hear from bus drivers who are protesting for better working conditions.
Good evening to you from Washington as the flags there flutter in a light breeze beneath the Washington Monument. And millions of people across this nation are now, as I speak, choosing their next president. In the coming hours, the votes will be counted in a race that's been on a knife edge for weeks. But what many people have been telling us here, not just in the capital, but where we've been, in Wisconsin and Arizona and elsewhere, is that whatever the result, it must be clear and definitive and draw a line under what's been a vitriolic and at times acrimonious race. The stakes couldn't be higher. Whomever wins, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, will chart very different courses for the future of this country. Well, we'll be watching all the results as they come in throughout the night, and do keep an eye on the tally at the bottom of the screen. 270 Electoral College votes are what's needed to win the White House. That's the magic number. Tonight, we'll be hearing from voters across the key swing states likely to decide the winner. But first, Sarah Smith, our North America editor, takes a look now at how this momentous day has unfolded so far.
Every vote matters. And let's go, Kamala.
Into the early hours of this morning, the stars came out for Kamala Harris. It's obviously not a victory party, but the Harris campaign is sending a deliberately optimistic message.
Tonight, then we finish as we started, with optimism, with energy, with joy.
She said herself to be nauseously optimistic, which doesn't sound particularly comfortable. And there are still menacing warnings about re-electing Donald Trump.
If we don't show up tomorrow, it is entirely possible that we will not have the opportunity to ever cast a ballot again.
Today, Ms. Harris thanked campaign workers and joined their efforts on the phone to remind people to get out and vote.
Carolyn?
Voting in Florida, Donald Trump said he does not expect any major disruption from his supporters.
Of course there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people.
Donald Trump's been battling for 4 years to get back into the White House, ever since he was evicted after the last election.
Kamala Harris has delivered soaring prices and economic anguish at home, war and chaos abroad, and nation-destroying invasion on our southern border like nobody's ever seen before. She's actually a disaster.
His campaign managers worry he could lose himself this election with his loose talk, like this attack on Democrat Nancy Pelosi last night.
She's a crooked person. She's a bad person. Evil. She's an evil, sick, crazy bitch. Oh, no. It starts with a B, but I won't say it. I want to say it.
The polling stations are now open and busy in all 50 states and 6 time zones across the US. Voters are making their choice in what many say they think is the most consequential election of their lifetimes.
I woke up and I was crying this morning. I was in tears and I feel like I'll be sick all day. I haven't been able to have breakfast, but I voted, and that's the most that I can do, right?
I'm here to get Trump reelected. That's the man needs to be back in office, because 4 years now I've been suffering under this administration.
I voted for Kamala, and I think it's especially important because just all the ridiculous and outrageous things that Trump are saying, and he's trying to make America a fascist state again.
In the state of Georgia, 2 polling stations were briefly disrupted by bomb threats that were deemed non-credible and thought to have come from Russia.
They picked on the wrong Georgia. They need to pick on the other one in the Black Sea, because we're not going to be intimidated.
Amidst fears there could be attempts to intimidate voters at polling stations, the authorities have a succinct message.
Anybody who thinks it's time to play militia, F around and find out. Anybody who thinks it's time to insult, to deride, to mistreat, to threaten people, F around and find out.
The first results already in from tiny Dixville Notch, where there are only 6 voters, who split evenly, 3 for Harris, 3 for Trump.
Morning. How you doing?
The results from the first of the key swing states will be known in the next few hours. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Washington.
Yeah, so all eyes will be on the 7 so-called swing states overnight and into tomorrow. And in these key battlegrounds where it's difficult to predict the outcome, the polls appear particularly tight. Just have a look at Arizona, for instance. You can see there, Donald Trump's edge is down nearly a point since yesterday. In some of the other swing states, the race is even tighter. Neither candidate can bank on a win. And the final result could come down to just a few thousand votes.
So what is the path to the White House? Well, who becomes president is decided by something called the Electoral College, with each of the 50 states having a certain number of Electoral College votes, depending on the size of their population. So, for example, California, which traditionally backs the Democrats, gets 54 votes. That means all 54 of those votes will go to Kamala Harris. Whereas Texas, which is largely Republican, gets 40 votes. So all those votes go to Donald Trump. Overall, the total number of votes up for grabs is 538. And the magic number to get to the White House is 270. So keep that important number in mind, 270 Electoral College votes, with the 7 crucial swing states, the main battlegrounds, because we simply don't know which way they'll go. In most of them, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, we could have a result by the end of tomorrow. Pennsylvania is the biggest prize with 19 electoral college votes. Nearly 13 million people live in Pennsylvania, but in 2020, Joe Biden won by just 80,000 votes. Other states like Arizona and Nevada could take some days to count their mail-in ballots, so we might not know who's become the 47th president for some time. Yeah, now you know why we've been banging on about Pennsylvania for weeks and weeks. 19 electoral college votes, a big prize in this election, and we're going to go straight to that state now. Join Anna Foster, who's live in Philadelphia. Anna, you've been talking to voters. What have they been saying?
Clive, they've had a lot to say today. When the sun rose this morning, I was here at this polling place before the doors even opened. There was a queue that stretched for a city block, and it was that way for hours. People queuing patiently, waiting to cast their votes. And 10 hours later, as the sun sets, we are back here again. You can hear the sound of a teenage marching band in the background, encouraging people to cast their votes in these final few hours. But as you say, so much time, effort, energy, money has been lavished on the state of Pennsylvania by both campaigns. It is the place where Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt a few months ago. It is the place where Kamala Harris held her final rally in this city of Philadelphia last night. And as you say, it is the big prize that both sides want to win. But there have been some issues across the state today in Cambria County, in the west, closer to Pittsburgh. The electoral officials actually put in a petition to stretch the voting hours because their electronic voting machines were not working when people turned up to cast their votes this morning. So they want extra time for that. You can see people are out on the streets here now. The anticipation, the nerves are building, Clive, but all eyes will be here on Pennsylvania because it is very difficult to win the White House without taking this state.
Indeed it is. All right. Anna Foster there live in Philadelphia. So, our nation waits with the first of the polls about to close. I should say there has been concern about the possibility of unrest in some areas after the result. Here in Washington, for instance, we came across some people boarding up their businesses. And the National Guard has been put on standby in some states. So, on this momentous day, what is the mood in the two camps? Gary O'Donoghue is with Donald Trump's team in Florida, and Sarah Smith is at Kamala Harris's HQ in Washington. Sarah, to you first. Kamala Harris was saying that they had the momentum going into polling day. How are they feeling now?
Well, I'm getting messages from people inside the Harris campaign saying that they're seeing both anecdotal and statistical evidence that suggests that they're going to outperform their polls. But, you know, let's take that with a pinch of salt. That is what they would say, isn't it? And of course, they're likely to interpret any anecdotal evidence from the ground in a very positive way, because the truth is, nobody knows. Can you imagine how anxious both candidates might be at this point? It's highly unusual to get to polling day and everything to still be on such a knife edge. So nobody can be sure who is going to win this election, and it all comes down to who has turned out at the polls. And you know, some of them are still going to be open for several hours yet. It could still change who wins this election depending on who walks into those polling stations in the next couple of hours.
All right, Sarah, thank you. To you, Gary, with Donald Trump's team in Florida, the former president has come out and said he's going to win, and it's not even going to be close. Are they really that confident?
No, I don't think they're that confident, but what they're saying and what he said when he voted this morning is that he would accept the election result if, he said, the election was fair. Now, he sounded pretty tired, he sounded pretty hoarse, not surprising with the multiple events through multiple swing states over the last few days. And indeed, he's been spending the last few hours, we understand, doing these sort of tele-rallies where he's been trying to persuade particularly young male voters, where he has a significant advantage, to actually get out and vote on election day. Now, we're hearing also that some elements of his campaign are urging him perhaps to come out and claim victory early on this stage behind me here, if he's showing a lead in some of those key swing states. Other elements suggesting that that could end up with him looking foolish. Clive, we know at the end of the day Donald Trump is going to make his own decisions on that one. It's going to be an unpredictable night.
Indeed. All right, Gary O'Donoghue with the Donald Trump team in Florida. Thanks, Gary. And Victoria will have more on the election over on Newsnight on BBC Two shortly.
America is deciding and the world is watching. Will it be Harris or Trump? And how will this divided nation respond? Whoever wins. Join us for a Newsnight US election special live at 10:30 on BBC Two, BBC News and iPlayer.
That's coming up. More from us here in Washington a little later on. But for now, it's back to you, Fiona, in the studio with the rest of the day's news.
Clive, thanks very much. 2 weeks ago, Olympic cycling champion Sir Chris Hoy, who's 48, revealed that his prostate cancer is terminal. Both his father and grandfather had the disease. But currently men can't ask for the test on the NHS until the age of 50. There are around 12,000 deaths from prostate cancer in the UK each year. The government now says it will review the guidance. Here's our medical editor, Fergus Walsh.
Sir Chris Hoy was the epitome of peak physical fitness. But a year ago, what he thought was a gym injury led to a scan showing he has stage 4 advanced prostate cancer.
Completely out the blue. No symptoms, no warnings, nothing. All I had was a pain in my shoulder. I remember the feeling of just absolute horror and shock. How on earth are we going to tell the kids? And I think the key was telling them about the treatment and saying, like, I'm about to get chemotherapy. It's going to make me quite unwell. It's not the cancer that's making me unwell, but this is going to knock me back, but it's medicine that's going to push back the cancer for as long as possible and make me feel better for a while.
Even for someone used to pushing themselves to the limits, chemotherapy was tough, especially wearing an ice cap to prevent hair loss.
It was excruciating. It's like torture, basically. I remember just thinking, I'm sitting here in a warm hospital room with a cold cap on my head. Come on, I know this is going to end. It's going to end in a couple of hours' time. This isn't that bad. It seems horrendous when you look, you think, oh, this is 2 more hours, I can't cope. Don't do it for 2 hours, do it for 1 minute. The strategy was just take it one step at a time.
Men over 50 can request a blood test known as PSA, which can detect prostate cancer. So Chris wants men tested earlier.
If you've got family history of it, like I have, if you're over the age of 45, go and ask your doctor. Just get the test a little bit earlier, catch it before you need to have any major treatment. To me, it seems a no-brainer. You know, why would they not reduce the age, bring the age down?
The health secretaries in England and Scotland have asked for the NHS to review the evidence. That may depend on a major trial which will compare the accuracy of blood and saliva tests and MRI scans, which could eventually lead to a national screening programme. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Protesters in Israel have taken to the streets to demonstrate against the sacking of the country's defence minister. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu fired Yoav Gallant, saying there is a crisis of trust between them. Mr. Gallant had been pushing for an end to the war and a hostage deal. Israel's war in Lebanon with the Iranian-backed Hezbollah continues, with the Bekaa Valley, the militant group's heartland in the east of the country, coming under attack. Israel says it only targets Hezbollah sites, with Hezbollah still firing rockets into Israel. But in a special report, Quentin Somerville and camera journalist Darren Conway have been out with Lebanon's Civil Defence Force, who say a large number of civilians, including women and children, are being killed. And I should warn you, you may find this report upsetting. It contains images of distressed and injured children.
Lebanon's descent into misery has been swift and all-encompassing. Families fearful of Israeli bombs dare not sleep at home, and Beirut shelters are full. In the last month, more than 1 million people have been displaced, a fifth of the population, in a state that could barely take care of them before the war. And the conflict is creeping deeper into Lebanon. Daybreak in the east, in the Bekaa Valley, and a rare moment of respite for the men of the Civil Defence Force. They're underpaid, overstretched and exhausted. The sound of an Israeli drone circles ominously overhead. The Bekaa is being hammered by relentless rounds of Israeli airstrikes. Hezbollah holds sway and from here still launches weapons attacking Israel's north. There's just been another strike. This one down the road from the CDF station in Zahli. All they know is that an apartment block has been hit. In command is Samir El-Shkir.
Israel says these are targeted strikes. Are they targeted?
They are targeting civilian buildings. That's against humanity. That's genocide. We're seeing kids dead, kids torn into parts. What did they do wrong in life?
Despite the risk of another airstrike, rescue workers flood the scene. A woman pleads to be let in to search for her family.
They're still bringing out casualties. We don't know how many yet, but what we do know is that the families that were in that building, and we believe there were a number of civilians, had been displaced already from the south of the country. They come here because they thought they were safe. And now they're looking for their loved ones.
But Samir and his crew know that there are people trapped inside the rubble. Amid the chaos, they listen out for signs of life. And then success. A young man is found buried deep inside. Only his leg is broken, as Samir helps him to safety. But as the clear-up continues, an 8-month-old boy is still missing.
The hearing of that child crying, it gives you strength. You get stronger. The head was on the side. There were no rocks on the head. There was a block on his back. The child was on his stomach. We tried to take out the child the way that we got in, between the rocks.
The boy survived. How do you feel after that?
Devastated. Sad. Angry. It's some of the pictures are stuck in our head. They will never go away.
Only the gentle kisses from his mother will quieten Kayan's suffering. The 2-year-old's skull was fractured in an Israeli airstrike. They both survived the Bekaa's deadliest day. 63 people were killed, mostly women and children.
I heard them shouting, "We cannot find Kayan." So I started running and looking into the distance, wondering where my boy was. I screamed, "Where's my son?" I couldn't see him. Then I saw somebody carrying him, saying, "He's alive, he's alive." I thank God that my son is next to me.
Across the corridor, in agony, 3-year-old Celine grasps for comfort, but there's none to be found. She calls for her mother and father, but they were killed in the Israeli strike. She barely survived. Her doctors say she'll recover, but if neither Hezbollah nor Israel relent, then Lebanon's daily torment will endure. Quentin Somerville, BBC News, Baalbek.
Harrowing images there from the conflict in Lebanon. The father of Sarah Sharif has been giving evidence at his trial for her murder. The 10-year-old's body was found with dozens of injuries at her home in Surrey last year. Irfan Sharif told the court the child's stepmother was the true villain. Irfan Sharif, Sarah's stepmother, Beinash Batul, and uncle, Faisal Malik, have all denied murder. A man arrested at Manchester Airport by the National Crime Agency and extradited to France is one of 18 people who've been given lengthy jail sentences after being convicted of people smuggling offences. More than 100 boats and 1,000 life jackets were seized as part of a Europe-wide operation targeting a gang thought to be behind more than 10,000 small boat crossings to the UK. The Prince of Wales has described South Africa's community of park rangers as risking their lives every day from illegal poachers. This afternoon in Cape Town, Prince William announced a series of measures to better protect park rangers and their families. His 4-day tour will culminate with his Earthshot Prize awards ceremony, an annual award that gives £1 million prizes to the best environmental innovations. So that's all from me here. Back now to Clive in Washington with all the developments there in this most important of US elections. Clive, over to you.
Yes, Fiona, thank you. There have been some early indicators in the last few minutes about what voters care most about. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, can tell us more. What have you been hearing from these exit polls, Sarah?
So this is really interesting. These exit polls aren't telling us necessarily how many people are voting Democrat or Republican, but what's at the top of voters' minds when they go in to cast their ballots. And the most important issues, they've been saying, are democracy and the economy. That's what people have been thinking about most. So who does that favour? Well, I mean, of course, people could have different views about the economy and vote one way or the other. But in general, people who are unhappy about the state of economy, more likely to vote for Donald Trump. People who are worried about the state of democracy in America, probably more likely to vote for Kamala Harris. Then the next issues that voters cared about most were immigration, which has come up a great deal during this campaign, and abortion, which has been the other thing that we've been talking about a lot during this campaign. And there, once again, you can see a pretty even split. People concerned about immigration more likely to vote for Trump. People worried about abortion restrictions more likely to vote for Kamala Harris. So this tells us that the issues we've been talking about for the last few months are the ones that voters are the most concerned about. I don't think it gives us that many clues about who necessarily is going to win this election. Interestingly, 53% of the electorate so far appear to be female voters, but again, that doesn't necessarily tell us that that advantages one or other of the candidates.
Yeah, that's up 1% on last time. And the exit polls here, very different to the exit polls that we get in the UK during elections. This is more about intention rather than what the actual results might turn out to be. Sarah, this election has shown just how divided this country is, how irreconcilable both sides seem to be. Is your sense that if there is a clear result, a definitive result, as some people have been clamoring for here, that perhaps we can see more of a unity coming to this country once this whole thing is over? Or are both sides split for the foreseeable future?
Well, I think there's two issues there. A definitive result would obviously be useful in terms of convincing people that this was a free and fair election, because after what happened 4 years ago, there are a lot of people who harbour significant doubts about whether or not the electoral process is fair. So for the sake of democracy in general, it would be a good idea to have a clear-cut result and one that a lot of people believe in. Although just because there's a clear-cut result doesn't necessarily mean that some people will have total faith in it. But then you come down to the fact that a choice will have been made between two extremely different visions of the future for America. About half of the country will be deeply, deeply disappointed with what the result is, and it won't necessarily be easy to reconcile people who have such very different political views, so very, very disparate, just because some of them have won and some of them have lost.
All right. Sarah Smith, our North America editor, many thanks for your reporting, Sarah. We're going to give you some timings now about how the evening could unfold. There are 6 time zones in the US. It's a big place. So the polls will be closing throughout the night. Now, in just under 2 hours' time, at midnight, the polls will close in 6 states, including that key battleground state of Georgia. By 1 o'clock UK time, polling stations will have closed in over half of the 50 states, including North Carolina and Pennsylvania, which, as we've been hearing, is the biggest prize of all the swing states, with 19 electoral college votes. And then at 4 o'clock in the morning, with the exception of Hawaii and Alaska, the polling will be over. Now, you can follow all the results as they come in with full coverage of the election after the news with Katrina Perry and Sumi Somaskanda. Hi there to you both. You're in the studio already. What have you got planned?
Thanks, Clive. Yeah, we're here ready to go. Join us straight after this programme and follow one of the closest and most dramatic elections in modern US history.
We'll bring you all of the results as they happen and explain what they mean in the race for the White House.
We'll have a host of experts here in our studio, including Katty Kay, our special US correspondent.
And of course, as the night unfolds, we'll hear from our correspondents across the country and around the world.
So we're staying up all night for 11 hours of results and reaction.
So do join us for the BBC's US Election Night programme with Katrina and myself right after the news.
See you then.
All right, looking forward to it. Thank you. As you can imagine, there are media teams here from all over the world. Take a look at this. To my right, next to me here in Washington, broadcasters from Spain, France, even Egypt. All here because of the global significance of this election. It's a big story, no question about that. Time now, though, for a look at the weather, and Thomas has all the details. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Clive. Well, I'm here back in London. The forecast, well, little change over the next, not just few days, but we think right through the middle of November, and who knows, maybe even beyond. Mainly cloudy conditions with limited sunshine, patchy fog, a little bit of drizzle. We'll call it overall dry, just little bits and pieces of light rain, nothing more than that. But have a look at this blocking high. It extends all the way from the UK across Central Europe to the Caspian Sea and Asia. We're talking about thousands of miles of a large area of high pressure. This takes us into middle November, and another area of high pressure develops across the UK. That gives us an indication that the atmosphere is almost stalled, with the jet stream to the north of us taking all the weather fronts away from us. So very little in the way of rain, bar a bit of drizzle from thicker cloud in some spots of the country. Now tonight, where the skies do clear, despite this relatively mild air mass, temperatures will dip to about freezing, very close to the ground. But this warm air mass continues, certainly through much of this week. Now, when we get a southerly wind and the winds go over the mountains, they tend to break the clouds up a little bit to the lee of high ground, the other side of the mountain. So we could see some decent breaks, lengthy breaks of sunshine there around northern Scotland, to the north of Wales, some around the Pennines. And here temperatures could be around 16 degrees. But if you're stuck underneath that low grey sky with very little wind to push it around, it does feel pretty chilly, despite the fact that we're calling it a relatively mild air mass. Air mass is that body of atmosphere that drifts. 14 degrees, a typical temperature, I think. And this is what we are going to get over the next few days. Very little change. So if you're tracking your apps, you're not really going to spot much of a difference from day to day. Back to you. Back to Clive, that is.
Thomas, thank you for that. That's it from Washington. Before we join our colleagues for the news where you are, here are some highlights from the election campaign. Have a very good night.
More Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
I accept your nomination. People start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in.
We can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America, indeed the world.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden?
There is not a thing that comes to mind.
There's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Are we ready to do this?
Get out and vote.
Hello and welcome to BBC London. Tonight, Thursday's tube strike has been called off. Meanwhile, bus drivers are protesting for better working conditions. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Luxmy Gopal. Bus drivers have been protesting about working conditions in the capital. They say contracts that reward speed and the number of miles driven put theirs and the public's safety at risk. Transport for London says it takes safety seriously and is working on a range of measures to improve conditions. Here's our transport correspondent, Tom Edwards.
Bus drivers marching this morning calling for better conditions. A bus driver's life sometimes isn't easy, and many say fatigue is one of the problems.
What are you protesting for?
For a start, toilet, fatigue, drivers working odd hours, getting tired.
Toilets, it's not easy for us to travel and do our trips and not have the toilet at the other end and have to go back to the other end. And we need decent breaks.
Safety is not TfL's priority and never has been.
Campaigners have been calling for safer buses for years. Since 2014, 80 people have been killed in collisions with buses.
I had to give up, it was just too stressful. And then you go home and you're tired, because it is tired driving. It is tired mentally being aware of what's going on around you.
The families of those who have died in bus collisions, like Kathleen Finnegan, who died at Victoria bus station, recently also said they thought changes needed to be made.
We want to see how they investigate these incidents, and we want to see if the bus contracts are having an indirect impact on safety.
Campaigners say contracts need to emphasise safety.
The new government are going to roll out more bus services across the country. OK, good. The problem is, if they use what they call the London model, it will have the same institutional safety problems as we've got here in London. So you have contracts that reward miles and speed. That leads to bad driver working conditions, which is what today is about, and that leads to bad safety outcomes. Killed, seriously injured, families being torn apart.
TfL says drivers' safety is very important and it takes their welfare seriously. It says it is working on a range of measures to improve working conditions, health and well-being. Drivers, though, want action now. Tom Edwards, BBC London.
Well, sticking with transport news, planned strikes on the London Underground have been called off after talks over pay between the ASLEF union and Transport for London. The industrial action had been planned for Thursday and next Tuesday. ASLEF said it had received a significantly improved pay offer by London Underground management, which it would discuss with its members. TfL has urged the union to continue working with them. Now, this next story is incredible. A woman's been reunited with her father after 30 years, thanks partly to this programme. Mika had been told that her father slept rough in Tottenham, but while she was watching BBC London one evening, she saw the story of a Londoner who goes around helping homeless people in the area and decided to contact him to see if he'd ever come across her dad. Jessica Ure reports.
This is the moment that a father and daughter were reunited after 30 years.
I knelt down, I gave him the biggest cuddle, and I just sat with him. It felt very surreal, it was very emotional, but it felt very homely and warm all at the same time.
And this is the man that made it happen.
How's your journey been? Yeah, it was good, thank you.
Mika had been wanting to find her father, but had no way of locating him. All that she knew is he had been sleeping rough in Tottenham. And then she saw this.
Tonight, check this out. A 34-year-old from Tottenham helping the homeless across the capital with a little help from a cycling group he started.
My name's Veril Paul Walcott. I'm from Tottenham and I started the Homeless Network.
And on the TV they were showing all the stuff does the homeless out with the bikes and stuff, and I thought, well, it's got to be worth a try. He might ignore me, but I'll give it a go. So I messaged him, and then 20 minutes later he replied back saying, yeah, I've located your dad.
So when Mika had contacted me, I was so taken back by the news that she'd basically found her father through connecting with me, that I actually went down and visited him. I had a discussion with him and I said, I've got something I want to say to you and I'm not sure how you're going to take it. And he's like, okay. I said, well, there's someone called Mika that would like to see you. And he looked up at me from looking at the ground. He looked up at me and his eyes filled up and he goes, how do you know my daughter? Yeah, I want to see her. Tell her I want to see her. And he gave me a little voice message to play back to send back into to his daughter in Wiltshire so she could hear her dad's voice for the first time after 30 years.
Mika now comes to London often to visit her father. He doesn't have a phone, but he's never missing for long because Veril keeps in touch.
It doesn't have to be a miracle or one-off thing. This we can reunite people.
And after filming, just by chance, we see a familiar face. Jessica Ure, BBC London.
Beautiful moment. Now it's time for your bonfire night weather forecast from Sarah Thornton.
Hello there, very good evening to you. We've had a dry and cloudy few days, and that's how we're going to continue through the rest of this week. But the other thing to note is the temperatures are on the climb. It's going to be a mild end to the week. Temperatures well above average for the time of year. In fact, we're going to see that overnight tonight as well, because we do have an awful lot of cloud. Some breaks out towards the east. If we do see those breaks, that will allow for some mist and fog to form. It'll be stubborn to clear tomorrow as well. So all of us, no matter what, off to a grey start with either mist, fog or low cloud. 9 or 10 degrees is mild to start November morning. As we go through the day tomorrow, the odd break here and there. Here and there, the cloud could be thick enough for a touch of drizzle, and a top temperature of 14 Celsius, well above average for the time of year. It doesn't stop there. At the end of the week into the weekend, could be 16 degrees, and it will stay dry.
Yeah, that's 16 degrees. That is something, isn't it? Now, you can go to our social media pages to find out why it's back to the drawing board for Liverpool Street Station's design. Just search BBC London. Alice will be here tomorrow morning just before 6:30. But for now, from the late team, good night.
DI Calder, this is DI Macintosh. No one's seen Annie or Noah since they left the party last night.
There's something I need to ask you about.
Annie, has something happened?
Can I help you?
I was looking for Annie.
Ian didn't want the marriage to end.
Was Annie scared of him?
Are we looking at an affair?
Professor Ewan Rossi.
I'm an old friend of Annie's.
Do you often break into the houses of your old friends?
I made a promise. I said I'd look after her.
That doesn't justify what you did. Nobody wants to believe their friends are capable of murder.
The new series of Shetland starts tomorrow at 9 on BBC One and iPlayer.
MasterChef The Professionals is back.
The competition is on.
That's the best I've seen in 10 years.
That was so intense. Time to uncover a new culinary superstar.
The new series of MasterChef The Professionals. Watch all this week's episodes now on BBC iPlayer.
Trump or Harris, America decides now on BBC One. Live through the night, analysis and reaction as the results come in for the US presidential election 2024.
We're just minutes away from the first results in a historically close election.
After months of campaigning across the country, it is the final countdown to knowing who will lead the United States for the next 4 years.
It's an election night matchup that seemed unlikely just months ago.
Now it comes down to Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. The BBC is right in the heart of the action.
I'm Sarah Smith at the Harris HQ in Washington, D.C., where her supporters will be watching the results coming in and hoping to see the candidate herself later tonight.
I'm Gary O'Donoghue with the Trump campaign in Florida, where the former president is expecting these results to deliver him an historic return to the White House.
I'm Clive Myrie in Washington, where Joe Biden will be watching the results come in at the White House to discover who'll be replacing him in the Oval Office.
BBC reporters are on the ground in the 7 swing states where this election will likely be won and lost. In Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, in North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona and Nevada. They're speaking to voters and hearing from the candidates as the results come in.
And across the globe, our correspondents are getting reaction in critical regions and analyzing the impact this election will have on the rest of the world.
Here in Washington, Christian Fraser is at the touchscreen, breaking down the results as they happen.
Our U.S. special correspondent, Katty Kay, is here, along with our expert panel for analysis throughout the night.
And as the night unfolds, BBC Verifies Mariana Spring will be working to separate fact from fiction in this highly contested election.
I'm Sumi Somaskanda.
And I'm Katrina Perry. We're live in Washington. This is the BBC's Election Night programme. you're looking at live pictures of voting taking place right now all around the United States. In just a few minutes, we'll get the first results of the 2024 US presidential election. When polls begin to close in the states of Indiana and Kentucky, we'll bring them to you live as we get them.
More than 80 million people already participated in pre-election voting around the country, some states seeing record numbers. Now, the campaigns are preparing for the long haul as results come in, and this could be one of the tightest races in modern U.S. history.
The BBC is following this election across the U.S. and around the world like no one else can.
Here in Washington, we have our expert panel, former members of Congress Rodney Davis and Stephanie Murphy and Katty Kay with us. Stay with us all night long as we bring you up-to-the-minute results and race projections. First, let's get right to our correspondents. BBC North America editor Sarah Smith is at the Harris campaign watch party right here in Washington, D.C. Sarah, what's the mood like there tonight?
Well, there's a bit of excitement building. We just saw a rehearsal with some dancers who are obviously planning to come on if there is anything to celebrate a little bit later on. The stage is very much set for Vice President Harris to be able to come and make an acceptance speech if indeed that's the way the night pans out. But nobody here, nobody who's helping set this up, none of her supporters who are starting to arrive really has any idea whether or not that's going to be the case. I've been getting messages from people inside the Harris campaign saying that they've seen anecdotal evidence, they've seen some statistics that make them think she will outperform the polls that we've been seeing. But, you know, that's what you would expect them to say at this point in the campaign, isn't it? They're trying to keep an optimistic frame of mind. The truth is, they don't know any better than the rest of us whether what happens here at Howard University is going to turn into a celebration or whether we're going to hear her conceding defeat.
Who knows, indeed. Thanks for that, Sarah. Now let's go to the Donald Trump campaign headquarters in Florida, where BBC